My presentation topic is on pop art by Roy Lichtenstein. I want to start off with a little background about Roy Lichtenstein. Lichtenstein was one of the first American pop artists to achieve and become a leading person of pop art. He became known in the 1960s and worked around artists like Andy Warhol and Jasper Johns. He was born October 1923 in New York and died in September of 1997. He attended Ohio State University, the Art Students League of New York, Parsons School of Design, and Dwight School. He had 2 wives and 2 sons during his life. Some information about Lichtenstein is that as a young boy, he had 2 very strong interests: comic books and science. In 1937, he took interest in a higher level of art when he decided to take up watercoloring classes. He attended the Parsons School of Design, and then he also attended the Art Students League and took classes there as well. After he graduated from Manhattan's Franklin School for Boys, he enrolled to Ohio State University to get his college tuition, although not long after he was forced to leave school during World War II. Lichtenstein was drafted to the war and was sent to Europe in 1943. In the 1960s, Lichtenstein began exploring a wide range of subjects and painting techniques. He did this alongside his teaching career at Rutgers University, which I found very interesting because I live very close to there. Lichtenstein had a different style from these other artists during his time. Instead of focusing on the emotional aspect of his work, he was more interested in making sure the use of stencils and rather impersonal means of presenting his ideas. In 1963, he released Wham! Wham! Is a very famous for a comic book panel that was inspired by the All-American Men of War from DC Comics' 1962 issue. During the 1970s, he became more drawn towards creating artwork that had reference to various artists in the 20th century. He did artwork inspired by artists like Salvador Dali and Claude Monet. By the early 1980s to the late 1990s, Lichtenstein created art that involved things like mirrors and houses, but he also used a twist of cartoon in them. However, he always made his artwork have realisticness with cartoons as well. He not only did paintings, but sculptures too. For the artistic style and movement, since he was very much famous for his pop art, which is the movement that emerged in the United Kingdom and the United States during the mid-1950s, he also created pop art and abstract impressionism. This movement had challenged traditions of fine art by including imagery from popular and mass culture. For example, advertising, comic books, and mundane mass-production cultured objects was a challenge. He became very famous for his bright and bold paintings of comic strip cartoons, as well as his paintings of everyday objects. Lichtenstein created all different types of art, including sculptural, murals, prints, and ceramics. He chose his colors very carefully to imitate 4 colors of printer's ink. During the time when pop art was very famous, it was during the 1950s to the 60s, which a lot of things happened during this time, such as it was known as the golden era for the 50s, and it was called this because it was the golden age of capitalism, a period of unpredicted economic growth, which benefited both the capitalists and workers as a high result of wages. Also during this time was the Vietnam War, the civil rights protests, and unfortunately the assassination of U.S. President John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King. It was also the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Something positive, though, during this time was that the 1960s was the first time a man landed on the moon. The first image that I discuss is Drowning Girl. Drowning Girl was created in 1963, and it shows a woman crying who appears to be in the process of being swallowed by a wave. It claims that the girl is saying, "I don't care, I'd rather sink than call Brad for help." And though the woman appears to be drowning, the most of the focus of the painting is towards her sadness and sorrow. The dimensions are 5 by 5. The period is pop art. The collection is Run from Love. It was created in 1963. The medium used is oil paint and is currently at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. The second image that I go over is Varum. Varum was created in 1963 as well. It shows an explosion of the sound as well as the name. The dimension of the art is 142 centimeters by 142 centimeters. It is currently at the John Kamiki Powers collection. The subject is an onomatopoeia, explosion. The period is pop art, and the medium used is paint. The last artwork that I go over is named Look Mickey. Look Mickey was created in 1961. It is on an oil canvas and is widely regarded as the bridge between his abstract impressionism and pop art works. It is notable for its ironic humor and aesthetic. Currently in the National Gallery of Art East Building. The medium uses oil paint. The period is pop art, and the genre of the painting is history painting. Lichtenstein was a very influential person. Lichtenstein took popular and commonplace art and transformed it into something iconic and special. He used canvas and oil paint, which are known as the material of a high artist. Lichtenstein also produced the comfortable aesthetic of comic books, newsprint, and advertising graphics. Artsy claims that Lichtenstein brought what was then a great taboo, commercial art, into the gallery. His work makes people pay attention to the production process of art and design. For example, his hand-painted reproductions of the oversized Ben-Day really show how he uses that. In 1964, he was called, quote, one of the worst artists in America by a New York Times critic, and that was an accusation also said by Life magazine. What is ironic, though, is that 50 years later, in 2015, Lichtenstein's painting, quote, Nurse, sold for over $95 million, which is one of the most expanding art sales in history, and the highest price achieved by an artist in pop art. Another very influential thing about Lichtenstein is his work in anti-elitist. The Lichtenstein Foundation documents that, quote, even as an undergraduate, Lichtenstein objected to the notation that one set of lines or of a person's drawings was considered brilliant, and somebody else's that may have looked better to you was considered nothing but almost everyone, quote. People claim that his work subverted expectations of art form. For example, in the 1960s and 70s, he turned a sculpture into a discipline traditionally characterized by solid, stationary forms. But he also included things such as steam, rays of light, and reflections of glass. People say that Roy Lichtenstein shows how everything, quote, new in art designs must copy, break down, and repurpose the old. At the end of my presentation, I added some quotes by Lichtenstein that I thought were worth sharing. And the very last slides are my works cited. Thank you.